be very sensitive to the slightest feelings of boredom or expectation. Particularly the expectation that this meditation is going to provide for you something you presently lack. The feeling of boredom is the feeling I don't like what is present. The feeling of expectation is the feeling I want what is not present. They are really two sides of the same feeling. The presence of any such feelings betray the fact that we have allowed ourself or our being to become mixed up with, and as a result seemingly limited by the content or qualities of experience, thoughts, images, feelings, etc. This mixture of our essential, irreducible self or being with the content or qualities of experience produces the seemingly separate, finite self, on whose behalf all such feelings arise. It is only when John Smith allows his inherently peaceful self or being to become mixed up with King Lear's thoughts and feelings that he seems to become the person King Lear. And it is on behalf of this person that all King Lear's anger and upset and jealousy arises. In other words, the separate self or the ego that most people believe and feel themselves to be, and on whose behalf most people's activities and relationships are undertaken, is a mixture of our essential, inherently peaceful, unconditionally fulfilled self with the qualities of experience, the qualities of our thoughts, images, feelings, memories, etc. In other words, the apparently separate self is a mixture of the true and only self, of pure being or pure self-aware being, plus the limitations of thoughts, feelings, sensations, and perceptions. Prior to being mixed up with the content of our experience, our being is whole, complete or fulfilled, lacking nothing, undisturbed, needing nothing. It is only when we allow our self or our being to be mixed up with the content of experience that we seem to become a fragment, a temporary finite self, an unfulfilled self that needs to be completed by experience. An unfulfilled self that seeks objects, substances, activities, states of mind and relationships in order to fulfill itself or complete itself or return itself to its natural state of wholeness or fulfillment. In the traditional progressive paths, the temporary finite self or ego that most people believe and feel themselves to be is given a series of disciplines or practices that are aimed at curtailing or focusing or purifying its experience prior to its recognition of its true nature. But in this approach, we don't touch our experience, we don't manipulate our experience in any way. We just go directly to our essential being. King Lear does not have to practice meditation or yoga or japa or pranayama or any of these practices. He just goes directly to the knowledge, I am John Smith. It's the same here. We just go directly to the knowledge, I am. Directly to the knowing of our own being. Our own being is already and always in the same pristine condition. It is never tarnished by experience, and therefore does not need to be improved by discipline. The mirror does not need to be purified from the images that appear on it. It is already inherently empty of any of the images that arise on it. It is already pristine. Its essential nature is not changed by whatever does or does not appear on it or in it. No amount of polishing will change the nature of the mirror. It is already perfectly transparent, luminous, clear, pristine. Our being is just like that. It is never tarnished by experience, and therefore does not need to be improved by effort or discipline. It is already perfectly clear, free, luminous, empty, transparent. It does not need to be stilled, because it was not moved by experience in the first place. It does not need to be fulfilled by experience, because being full of itself, it never experiences any lack. It cannot become enlightened, because it is already the light of the self that shines equally brightly in all experience. For many people, the light of their being, with its inherent peace and unconditional fulfillment, is mixed with and therefore seemingly veiled by the content of experience. And this mixture of ourself with the limitations of experience gives rise to the belief and feeling of being a temporary, finite, limited self. It is on behalf of this separate self that all our afflictive emotions arise. And therefore the ultimate remedy for all such afflictive emotions is to trace our way back to our essential, irreducible self or being, to return from the adventure of experience to ourself. That is the essence of meditation or prayer. It is the ultimate healing, and it is the direct path to peace and happiness. If we seem to have to make an effort to return to ourself, then we should make the effort. In time, as we become more and more accustomed to being knowingly ourself, less effort will be required. It will just become our new natural condition. And in time, experience will, in most cases, gradually lose its capacity or its power to take us away from ourself. The reason why everybody has the feeling of being their self is because everybody knows their self. Even if for many people their knowledge of their self is still mixed up with their knowledge of other things, such as thoughts and feelings. It is because we know ourself that we are able to say with absolute certainty, I am. In other words, when we say I am, what we are really saying is, I know that I am. In other words, in this statement, it is clear that the being or the self that I am knows itself. In other words, our being is self-aware or self-knowing. Our being is not known by something other than itself. It is I that knows myself. And thus our being is really aware being. This is what is meant by the word awareness, the aware being that I am, or the fact of being aware. In other words, our knowledge of ourself is awareness's knowledge of itself. See that your awareness of yourself, the consciousness of your being, is your primary experience. Everything that you know and experience is, so to speak, downstream of your knowledge of yourself. And everything apart from your knowledge of yourself is superfluous to you. It is not essential to you. It is added to you and then removed from you. But you alone remain. Our knowledge of our own being is the only knowledge that is absolutely essential to us. And our knowledge of our being, as it essentially is before it is colored by experience, is the experience of peace or happiness. See clearly that your own being, before it is qualified by experience, shares none of the limits of experience. In other words, your being is not really your being. The fact of being doesn't belong to you as a person. It is not limited to you as a person. In other words, you, your being, yourself, is not essentially a person. You are not a human being. You are just being. Unlimited, self-aware being. And this is, in fact, entirely consistent with our experience. If we look at our thoughts, images, feelings, memories, etc., these are all limited. They all start and stop. They are all temporary and finite. But if we look, so to speak, at ourself, just the raw experience of being, before our being is qualified in any way by experience, we find no limits there. No limits in time or space. That is, if we stay close to the evidence of experience, we experience ourselves as ever-present, unlimited being, eternal, infinite being. In order to indicate that our essential self was eternal and being and had shed none of the limitations of our personal thoughts, feelings, sensations, perceptions. Some traditions gave it a name to indicate its universality and its impersonality, namely God. It's true that our being is universal in the sense that it is impersonal, transpersonal. But it is also utterly intimate. Over the years, the word God maintained the universal, impersonal aspect of being, but it lost touch with the intimate aspect of being. So the idea that God is something at an infinite distance from ourself arose out of this misunderstanding. People thought that because being is not personal, therefore it is not intimate. Our being is utterly impersonal and at the same time utterly intimate. In other words, our knowledge of ourself is awareness's knowledge of itself, which is God's knowledge of himself. Forgive me for using the word himself. I'm an old-fashioned Sufi. I can no longer get away with it on the West Coast. But I hope for a few more years I can get away with it on the East Coast. This is why Ramana Maharshi said, to surrender to God is to simply rest in the knowledge I am. To rest in one's being as one's being. To rest as being. To be knowingly only being. Remember, the name I is the name that which knows or is aware of itself gives to itself. only awareness is aware. And therefore only awareness is aware of itself. And therefore the name I, be sure that the name I always only refers to awareness's knowledge of itself. God's knowledge of himself. In other words, I is the divine name. Do not allow the name I to be tarnished by experience. Keep it sacred. Place it on the altar of your heart. See that all experience shines with the knowing of it. That is, all experience shines with the light of yourself. The light of God's presence. Allow experience to become increasingly transparent to the light of pure knowing. The light of yourself, or the light of God's presence. Until experience ceases to be a concealing power, but becomes instead a revealing power. Experience gradually loses its capacity to veil its reality and instead shines with it.